You know that feeling when you wake up and the air just feels different? Heavier, somehow? That is exactly how my morning started. My name is Monique Jackson, and looking back on it now, I think my spirit knew my life was about to shatter long before my mind was ready to accept it. I stood in the center of our master bedroom, a space that was supposed to be our sanctuary, but lately, it felt more like a beautifully decorated cage. The morning light was filtering in through the sheer curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the hardwood floor, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I watched my husband, Tyler Jackson, moving around the room with that frantic, focused energy he always had. He was adjusting his silk tie in the mirror, turning his head this way and that, checking for perfection. Everything with Tyler had to be perfect. His image, his career, his house, and his wife. But as I looked at his reflection, I didn't see the man I had fallen in love with years ago. I saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. He didn't look at me. He hadn't really looked at me in months. It was as if I had become another piece of furniture in this expensive house, something necessary for the aesthetic but ultimately easy to ignore. Tyler grabbed his watch from the dresser, the gold catching the light. I cleared my throat, the sound small and pathetic in the quiet room. I wanted to ask him about his plans for the evening, to see if maybe, just maybe, we could have dinner together like a normal couple. But the words got stuck. My sister, Kiana, had warned me about being too pushy. Kiana Jackson was always the observant one, the one who saw the cracks in the foundation while I was busy trying to paint over them. She had told me just last week that Tyler's late nights weren't normal, that his sudden need for privacy with his phone was a red flag I was choosing to ignore. I finally managed to speak, my voice trembling slightly. Tyler, will you be home for dinner tonight? I was thinking of making that roast you used to like. He didn't even pause. He just grabbed his briefcase, his eyes glued to his phone as his thumbs flew across the screen. I wondered who was on the other end of those messages. Was it a client? Or was it someone else? The thought made my stomach turn, a sharp twist of nausea that I quickly pushed down. I'll be late, Monique, he said, his tone dismissive and flat. Don't wait up. And don't call me, I'll be in meetings all day. He walked past me without a kiss, without a touch, leaving only the scent of his expensive cologne and the cold draft from the hallway. I heard the front door close downstairs, the sound echoing through the house like a final judgment. I walked over to the window and pulled back the curtain, watching as his luxury sedan backed out of the driveway and sped off down the street. He was in such a hurry to leave me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. I looked at the screen and saw Kiana's name. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I wasn't ready to tell her she was right. I wasn't ready to say the words out loud. But as I stood there in the silence of my perfect, empty home, I knew that the story of my marriage was changing. I just didn't realize that the end was beginning right now. I want you to picture this moment with me. Imagine being 7 months pregnant sitting on a hard wooden bench in family court while your husband's mistress openly mocks you. She is flashing a diamond engagement ring and whispering cruel insults while you are just trying to breathe through the contractions of stress tightening your belly. She thinks she has already won and my husband thinks his money and power make him untouchable, but they had no idea that Judge Octavia Anderson had been watching every single word, every gesture and every lie. She was about to ask one single question that would flip this entire courtroom upside down. Before I tell you exactly how justice was served, make sure you are following along because you will want to see how this ends. Now let me take you back to the moment everything changed. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before my custody hearing was scheduled to begin. The humidity in the air was already thick and my sister Kiana held my arm firmly as we climbed the imposing stone steps. She steadied me when I had to pause to catch my breath because at 7 months pregnant even simple tasks like walking upstairs felt monumental. Kiana whispered asking if I was okay and I nodded even though my hands were trembling. I was clutching a manila folder containing every piece of evidence I had managed to gather on my own. It held bank statements showing how my husband Tyler had cut off my credit card's text messages where he ignored my updates about doctor appointments and a voicemail where his voice sounded so cold and distant, saying words I would never forget. He had said maybe this baby was a mistake. We pushed through the heavy double doors into the marble lobby, and the air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice. My phone buzzed in my purse, and I pulled it out to see a text from my lawyer Dominique Williams. It read: accident on I-95 running 20 minutes late, do not let them start without me, stall if you can. My stomach dropped all the way to my shoes. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. I typed back a quick response and shoved the phone into my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. Kiana asked what was wrong, and when I told her Dominique was stuck in traffic, she squeezed my hand tight and told me we would just have to wait because they could not start without my lawyer. But as we rounded the corner toward courtroom 3B, I saw him. Tyler Jackson stood near the entrance looking every bit the successful venture capitalist he was. His navy suit was tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders and his dark fade was fresh. Beside him stood his attorney Gabriel Davis, a man known throughout the city as a ruthless litigation specialist who charged $800 an hour. Tyler saw me and his expression shifted into something that might have passed for concern if I did not know him better. He started to approach me and Kiana stepped forward, telling him firmly not to talk to me, but Tyler was already there. His voice was low and reasonable as he said, "Monique, we do not have to do this, we can settle everything today and you can walk away with dignity." I forced myself to look him in the eye and told him I was waiting for my attorney. Tyler smiled, that thin condescending smile I used to mistake for confidence. He said Dominique Williams is a solo practitioner who handles 20 cases at a time, and told me I was bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. Gabriel Davis appeared at Tyler's shoulder, smooth as a shark in a suit. He told me his client was prepared to offer very generous terms consisting of $3,000 per month in child support, visitation rights, and a confidentiality agreement regarding the circumstances of our separation. My hands tightened on my folder until my knuckles turned white. I asked if a confidentiality agreement meant I was not allowed to tell anyone about the affair. Davis said smoothly that they preferred to think of it as protecting all parties involved, including the child. Before I could respond, I heard the sharp click of high heels on the marble floor. Destiny Harris walked toward us, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. I had seen photos of Destiny on Tyler's Instagram, carefully cropped to look like professional colleagues, but seeing her in person was different. Destiny was 28 years old, 4 years younger than me. She wore a fitted navy dress and carried herself with the arrogance of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. She did not even glance at me as she approached Tyler and told him the bailiff said they were ready. Kiana stepped between us and asked who she was. Destiny finally looked at me and her smile was perfectly pleasant and perfectly cruel. She introduced herself as Destiny Harris and said she was there for moral support. Kiana said flatly that she was the mistress, but Destiny corrected her, saying she was Tyler's girlfriend. She claimed the divorce had been in process for 7 months and she was not breaking up any marriage. I found my voice and said I was 2 months pregnant when he moved out. Destiny's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes as she said that must have been difficult for me because pregnancy can be so emotionally overwhelming. The words were sympathetic, but the tone was pure poison. The bailiff appeared in the doorway, calling Jackson versus Jackson. I checked my phone one more time, but there was no response from Dominique. I looked at Kiana, who nodded encouragement, and I told the bailiff I needed to request a continuance because my attorney was delayed. The bailiff gestured toward the courtroom and said I could request that from the judge. We filed inside, and the courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with wooden benches that smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. Destiny sat in the public gallery 3 rows back while Tyler and his attorney took their position at the defendant's table. Kiana and I sat at the plaintiff's table, and I felt acutely aware of the empty chair beside me where Dominique should have been. Judge Octavia Anderson entered through a side door. She was a formidable woman with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. Everyone stood and she told us to be seated. She glanced at the papers in front of her, then looked at me asking where my attorney was. I stood up, my voice steadier than I felt, and explained that she was delayed due to a traffic accident and requested a 15-minute continuance. Judge Anderson checked her watch and granted me 15 minutes, but warned that if she was not here by 9:30 we would proceed. The gavel cracked against the wood and court was in recess. I sank back into my chair, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Kiana leaned close and whispered that I could do this even if Dominique did not make it, but I was not looking at my sister. I was watching Destiny, who had risen from her seat and was walking toward the hallway. As she passed my table she paused and spoke quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. She said Tyler told her I always had a martyr complex and that it was not good for the baby's stress levels. She held up her left hand to adjust her purse strap, and the diamond on her ring finger caught the fluorescent light. It was enormous and it was new. She continued, saying they were thinking of a spring wedding, just a small ceremony for family. I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. They were engaged while I was fighting for custody of our unborn child. Tyler had already moved on to planning his next marriage. Destiny smiled that devastatingly pleasant smile and walked out into the hallway, leaving me sitting there with my hand pressed against my pregnant belly, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. Kiana grabbed my hand, telling me not to let her see me cry, but the damage was done. The 15 minutes passed in a blur and Dominique did not arrive. At 9:30 exactly, the bailiff called everyone back into the courtroom. I checked my phone one final time, but there was still nothing. My hand shook as I stood up. Judge Anderson looked at the empty chair beside me and asked if my attorney had arrived. I said no, but I expected her any moment. The judge's expression was neutral as she said we could not delay court proceedings indefinitely and asked if I wished to request a postponement. My mind raced because postponement meant more time, but it also meant more uncertainty, more stress, and more nights lying awake wondering what would happen to my baby. Tyler would use that time to build an even stronger case against me. I told the judge I would proceed. She asked if I understood I was representing myself pro se, and I said yes. Gabriel Davis stood immediately and requested primary physical custody of our minor child with supervised visitation for me, claiming they had substantial evidence regarding my emotional and financial instability. I stood up on unsteady legs and objected to the characterization of instability, stating I was 7 months pregnant and in excellent health according to my doctor. Judge Anderson made a note and told Mr. Davis to present his evidence, reminding everyone that this was a preliminary hearing. Davis opened his folder with practice deficiency and stated that Tyler earned approximately $850,000 annually, owned a 4-bedroom home in Chevy Chase with excellent schools nearby, and had family in the area. He paused, letting that sink in before turning his attack on me. He described me as unemployed, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with no family in the immediate area besides my sister, who worked full-time. He said I left my marketing position 7 months ago and had made no effort to seek new employment. My hands clenched because the way he described it made me sound lazy and irresponsible. He did not mention that Tyler had called my boss and told him I was taking indefinite medical leave without asking me first. He did not mention that Tyler owned the apartment I was living in and could evict me at any time. I tried to interrupt, but Judge Anderson told me I would have my opportunity to speak later. Davis continued, saying I had been seeing a therapist for 4 months and claimed I experienced severe mood swings, memory issues, and difficulty making decisions. I shouted that it was not true, and the judge looked at me sharply, telling me not to interrupt again. I sat down with my face burning. Davis pulled out a letter from a Dr. Christian Thomas, a clinical psychologist who evaluated Tyler and found him to demonstrate exemplary parental readiness. The letter also noted Tyler's concerns about my stress levels affecting fetal development. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. They were using my normal pregnancy anxiety against me and had paid a psychologist to write a report saying Tyler was a perfect father while painting me as a danger to my own baby. Judge Anderson read the document and asked if Dr. Thomas ever interviewed me. Davis admitted I had declined to participate. I stood up and said I was never asked. The judge asked if that was true, and I confirmed I received no request to meet with any psychologist. Davis claimed the request was sent to my attorney 6 weeks ago. I felt my stomach sink, wondering if Dominique had dropped the ball or if Davis was lying. Judge Anderson gave me the floor and asked what evidence I had. I stood gripping my folder, my hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. I told her I had text messages showing Tyler's lack of interest in the pregnancy. He missed every major doctor's appointment and never asked about my health. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the messages showing how he ignored my texts about the ultrasound and responded with just okay when I told him we were having a girl. The bailiff took my phone to the judge, who scrolled through the messages with a neutral expression. I continued presenting my bank statements showing how Tyler cut off my access to our joint credit cards without warning, forcing me to ask my sister for money to buy groceries. Then I played the voicemail where Tyler's cold voice filled the courtroom saying maybe this baby was a mistake. The courtroom went quiet and even Davis paused. Judge Anderson asked Tyler to explain. He stood and looked uncomfortable for the first time, saying it was taken out of context and he was expressing concerns about the timing, not the child. Judge Anderson said flatly that he told his pregnant wife the baby was a mistake. Tyler claimed he was emotional and regretted those words. I felt a surge of hope, thinking maybe the judge could see through his act. But then Davis called a medical expert named Dr. Samuel Miller to the stand. A man in his 50s rose from the gallery wearing a gray suit and carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to courtroom testimony. Davis established his credentials as a licensed clinical psychologist with 23 years of experience. Dr. Miller testified that he spent 4 hours interviewing Tyler and administered standardized tests, finding Tyler to be emotionally stable and genuinely concerned about his child. He claimed Tyler expressed significant worry about my emotional state, describing mood swings and social withdrawal. When I tried to object, saying Tyler had isolated me, Judge Anderson silenced me again. Dr. Miller concluded that based on Tyler's description, my behavior was concerning and Tyler was absolutely fit to be a custodial parent. Judge Anderson told me I could cross-examine. I stood slowly, having no legal training but knowing I had the truth. I asked Dr. Miller if he spent any time with me and he said no, claiming I declined. I pulled out my phone showing every email from my attorney proving there was no request. Dr. Miller shifted uncomfortably and said the request went to my attorney. I asked if he thought it was professional to evaluate a custody situation by talking to only one parent. He said it was not uncommon. I asked if he spoke to my doctor or therapist or friends and he said no to everything. Then I asked the question that mattered. I asked how much he was paid for the evaluation. Davis objected, but Judge Anderson allowed it. Dr. Miller answered $15,000. A murmur ran through the courtroom. I asked if he had done work for Tyler before and he admitted to conducting employment evaluations for Tyler's company over the past 3 years. I pointed out that he was a repeat client who paid significant sums and asked if that compromised his integrity. He denied it, but I could see the judge was paying close attention. After Dr. Miller stepped down, Davis called Destiny Harris as a character witness. The courtroom stirred with whispers. I objected immediately, stating she was my husband's mistress and had obvious bias, but Judge Anderson allowed the testimony, reminding Destiny she was under oath. Destiny sat in the witness chair, crossed her ankles elegantly and looked at Davis with calm professionalism. She testified that she had worked with Tyler for 3 years as corporate counsel and described him as one of the most principled people she had ever worked with. She claimed Tyler had expressed worry about my unhappiness and isolation over the past year. When asked when she learned I was pregnant, she lied smoothly, saying Tyler told her last winter and was worried about bringing a child into an unstable situation. Then came the critical question. Davis asked when their relationship became romantic. Destiny leaned forward and said it happened after Tyler moved out approximately 6 months ago, claiming their friendship evolved once he was no longer living with me. 6 months. Tyler had moved out 7 months ago. She was shaving time off the timeline to make it seem like the affair started after the separation. I stood up for cross-examination, my heart pounding. I asked her to confirm she worked at the company for 3 years and the relationship began 6 months ago. She said yes. I asked to approach the bench and handed the judge phone records I obtained through Discovery. I showed that in January 8 months ago there were 847 text messages exchanged between Tyler and Destiny. Destiny claimed they were working on a major acquisition, but I pointed out that meant 27 messages a day, including ones sent at 2 a.m. on Sundays. I pulled out credit card statements showing a $1,500 dinner at a romantic restaurant in Georgetown 5 days before Tyler moved out when I was 2 months pregnant. Destiny admitted she was there but claimed they discussed business. I asked if the $3,200 diamond bracelet from Cartier dated that same day was a business gift. The courtroom was silent. Destiny's voice lost its confidence as she said Tyler was generous. I asked her directly if she was romantically involved with my husband while I was pregnant. She said no. Then I pulled out my final document, hotel receipts from the Watergate Hotel from 9 months ago before I was even pregnant. Room service ordered for 2 people and champagne every evening. Destiny turned pale and stammered. I told her she was lying under oath and was the other woman who destroyed my family. Judge Anderson struck her gavel and warned Destiny about perjury, asking one final time when the relationship began. Destiny looked at the floor and whispered that it was before the pregnancy. The gallery erupted. Destiny fled the stand and I sat down feeling a surge of triumph, but I knew I still needed more. Suddenly the courtroom doors burst open and Dominique rushed in looking frazzled and apologetic, explaining the accident on I-95. Judge Anderson gave us a 10-minute recess. In the hallway, Dominique told me how bad the situation was despite my small win with Destiny. The psychological evaluation was damaging. I pulled out my phone and played a recording I made 3 days ago in the courthouse stairwell where Tyler told Destiny he planned to get full custody and make sure our daughter forgot she even had a mother. Dominique's eyes went wide, but then she told me the devastating news. We were in a 2-party consent state and the recording was illegal and inadmissible. Using it could get me charged with a crime. I felt like the ground had dropped out from beneath me. My smoking gun was useless. We went back into the courtroom and Dominique tried to introduce the recording anyway, arguing it went to the best interest of the child. Davis objected, citing wiretapping laws. Judge Anderson listened to the recording privately but ruled it inadmissible and warned me I could face prosecution. I stood up, tears streaming down my face, and said I could not do this anymore. I said Tyler had all the money and power and I had nothing. I moved toward the doors, but Judge Anderson's voice cut through the chaos like a knife, telling me to sit down right now. I froze and slowly returned to my seat, sobbing. Judge Anderson looked at everyone in the room and said quietly that we were not done here, in fact we were just getting started. She called Destiny back to the stand. Destiny looked terrified as she walked back. Judge Anderson asked about her salary. She revealed records showing Destiny's salary jumped from $120,000 to $190,000 18 months ago, a 58% raise. The judge asked when the relationship truly began and Destiny admitted it was 18 months ago, the same time she got the raise. The judge pointed out that Destiny was testifying about the character of a man who controlled her career and income, which was a massive conflict of interest. She then noted Destiny's perjury regarding the timeline. Then Judge Anderson turned her attention to Tyler. She made him stand and read the email he sent to my boss firing me without my knowledge. Tyler tried to say he was protecting me, but the judge shut him down, calling it sabotage. She brought up the finances, pointing out that while he cut me off for spending $800 on necessities, he spent $42,000 in 1 month on himself, including jewelry for Destiny and the psychologist's fee. She revealed the email from his attorney threatening to evict me from the apartment Tyler claimed we mutually agreed upon. Finally, she turned to Dr. Miller in the gallery. She calculated that he had received nearly $100,000 from Tyler over 3 years and then wrote a custody evaluation without ever speaking to me or my doctors. She read a letter from my obstetrician stating I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy with no signs of instability, proving Dr. Miller had put lies into an official report. The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Anderson looked at Destiny's engagement ring and asked when she got engaged. Destiny admitted it was last month. The judge asked if she thought proposing to his mistress in the middle of a custody battle with his pregnant wife would help his case. Judge Anderson leaned back and stated clearly that this was not a custody dispute but a coordinated campaign of financial and psychological abuse. She said Tyler had weaponized his resources to destroy me. She issued preliminary orders immediately. Primary physical custody was awarded to me. Tyler would have supervised visitation only at his own expense. Child support was set at $8,000 per month, almost triple what was offered, plus full medical and housing coverage. Tyler was ordered to restore my access to our marital home and pay $25,000 immediately for my legal fees. She ordered a forensic accounting of all his assets and referred his interference with my job to the Bar Association, Destiny's perjury to the state attorney, and Dr. Miller to the licensing board. The recess felt like hours, but when we walked out I knew I had won something far more important than a legal battle. I had won back my dignity. Outside the courthouse I passed Destiny crying by the water fountain. I told her she should resign before the investigation found what we both knew it would find, and reminded her to remember this feeling the next time she helped a man destroy his wife. A reporter from the Washington Post texted me wanting to tell my story, and I agreed because other women needed to know they could fight back. 3 weeks later I stood in the nursery of my home painting the walls a soft happy yellow. My sister Kiana was there helping me, and the house finally felt like mine. Diane stopped by with news that the forensic accountant found hidden millions. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter kick. We were safe. I had walked into that courtroom believing I had lost everything, but I walked out knowing that sometimes justice does prevail. $3 million, that means you are entitled to roughly $4 million after the division of assets. Monique stared at her attorney Dominique Williams, unable to process the magnitude of the number. $4 million plus ongoing monthly child support plus your share of the business equity plus the house. Monique, you are going to be financially secure for the rest of your life. Monique felt lightheaded, and she instinctively placed a hand on the side of her stomach. She had been so focused on just surviving, on keeping custody of her unborn daughter, that she had not allowed herself to think about the actual financial settlement. $4 million meant she could finally finish her master's degree. It meant she could start her own business without asking anyone for permission. It meant she could give her daughter Emma every opportunity in the world. Tyler is going to fight this, Monique said, her voice trembling slightly. Let him fight, Dominique replied with a confident smile. Judge Octavia Anderson already ruled that he has to provide complete financial disclosure. If he tries to hide assets now or plays games with the forensic accountants, he will go to jail for contempt. You have won, Monique, not just custody but everything. After Dominique left, Monique sat alone in the quiet living room for a long time, just absorbing the silence and the late afternoon sun filtering through the sheer curtains. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling Emma kick against her ribs, a strong rhythmic reminder of why she had fought so hard. You are going to have everything I never had, she whispered to the life growing inside her. Security options, freedom. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the trance. It was a text from Tyler's attorney Gabriel Davis stating, Mr. Jackson requests a phone call with you to discuss co-parenting arrangements. Monique stared at the message and felt her heart rate spike. 3 weeks ago Tyler had walked out of that courtroom without a word or even a glance in her direction. Now he wanted to talk, probably because he had seen the forensic accounting report, probably because he realized he was losing his empire. She took a deep breath and typed back, all communication must go through my attorney as per the court order. The response came quickly. Mr. Jackson believes direct communication would be beneficial for Emma. Monique felt a flash of white-hot anger. Now he cared about what was beneficial for Emma. Where was that concern when he was cutting off her credit cards at the grocery store? Where was that concern when he was sabotaging her job and calling their baby a mistake? The court order is clear, she typed, her fingers hitting the screen hard. No direct contact, all communication through attorneys. She blocked the number and set the phone down. Face distinct. Kiana came downstairs a few minutes later with streaks of yellow paint in her hair and a smudge on her cheek. Who are you texting? She asked, eyeing the phone. Tyler's lawyer. He wants to talk, Monique said, trying to keep her voice steady. What did you say? No. Kiana grinned fiercely. Good, let him beg through the lawyers. Let him know what it feels like to have absolutely no control. They ordered a large pepperoni pizza for dinner and ate it in the half-painted nursery, sitting on the floor with paper Plates as the sun set over the city skyline. Monique looked around at the soft yellow walls, the white furniture. Kiana had helped her assemble the mobile of stars and moons hanging above the crib, waiting for a baby who would arrive any day now. This was real, this was happening. She was building a life for herself and her daughter, a life free from Tyler's suffocation. You know what the best part is, Monique said, wiping crumbs from her hands. What? Kiana asked, taking a sip of water. He cannot take this away. He tried everything: money, lawyers, lies, manipulation, and he still lost. He cannot take this away from me. Kiana raised her water bottle in a toast to winning. Monique clinked her bottle against her sister's plastic rim to winning. The Washington Post article ran the next morning with the headline, "When Money Becomes a Weapon: How Wealthy Men Use Custody Battles to Punish Ex-Wives." Monique's phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. The first call was from her former boss at Thompson and Associates. "Monique, I just read the article. I had no idea Tyler lied to me about your medical leave. If you want your job back, we would love to have you." "Thank you, Marcus," Monique said, her voice cool and professional, "but I am going in a different direction." The second call was from a producer at CNN. "Mrs. Jackson, we would love to have you on our afternoon show to discuss your case and the broader issue of financial abuse and custody battles." Monique hesitated for a moment but then agreed to the interview. By noon, the article had been shared over 50,000 times on social media. Monique's inbox was flooded with messages from women sharing their own stories. Women who had been cut off financially, women whose husbands had sabotaged their careers, women who were fighting uphill custody battles against men with unlimited resources. One message stood out. It was from Amanda Blake at the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. "Mrs. Jackson, your story is exactly what we have been trying to highlight for years. Would you consider becoming an advocate? We need voices like yours to show other women they are not alone." Monique called Amanda back within the hour. "I want to help," Monique said, pacing her living room, "but I do not know what I can offer. I am not a lawyer or a counselor." "You are a survivor," Amanda said firmly. "You fought back and won. That is what women need to see, not just the horror stories but the victories. We want you to speak at events, share your story, and help us draft policy recommendations for family court reform." "Policy recommendations?" Monique repeated the words, tasting them. "Things like mandatory financial disclosure in custody cases, limits on how much parties can spend on expert witnesses, protections against employment sabotage." Your case highlighted all these issues. We need to turn that into actual change. Monique thought about all the women who had messaged her, all the women who were still fighting in silence. "Yes," she said, "I will do it." That afternoon she sat for the CNN interview via video link from her living room. The host, a woman named Patricia Winters, was direct and compassionate. "Monique, in the article you describe how your husband cut off your access to money, sabotaged your job, and then used your resulting financial instability as evidence that you were unfit to parent. How did you find the strength to fight back?" Monique touched her belly instinctively. "My daughter," she said, looking directly into the camera lens. "I kept thinking about what kind of mother I wanted to be for her. Did I want to be someone who gave up or someone who stood up for herself even when the odds were impossible?" "The judge in your case made some extraordinary rulings," Patricia noted. "She called out your husband's behavior in very strong terms. Do you think that is unusual?" "I think most judges see through these tactics, but they are constrained by the law." Monique explained, "If the law allows parties to spend unlimited money on expert witnesses, judges cannot stop them. That is why we need reform." The interview went viral within 24 hours. It had been viewed over 1 million times. Tyler's response came through his attorney. A sterile statement released to the press. "Mr. Jackson regrets that his private family matter has been made public. He remains committed to being a good father to his daughter and believes the court system should be allowed to work without media interference." Monique read the statement and laughed bitterly. Tyler was trying to take the high road now, but it was too late. The next day she received a letter from Jackson Ventures stating that Destiny Harris had resigned effective immediately. The company was conducting an internal investigation into possible violations of workplace ethics policies. Monique felt no satisfaction in Destiny's downfall, just a sad recognition that Destiny had made her choices and now had to live with the consequences. A week after the article ran, Monique received an invitation to speak at a family law conference in Chicago, then another invitation from a women's rights organization in California, then requests from 3 different universities to guest lecture about financial abuse. "You are becoming famous," Kiana said, scrolling through Twitter where Monique's case was being discussed by lawyers, activists, and journalists. "I do not want to be famous," Monique said, rubbing her lower back, which was aching constantly. "Now I want to make a difference." "You are doing both," Kiana replied. Monique's phone rang. It was Dominique. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" Monique asked, feeling a pit in her stomach. 3 more women have come forward with allegations against Tyler, similar patterns. He Dated them while married, cut them off financially when they got pregnant, used custody battles to punish them. One of them is filing a lawsuit. Monique sat down hard on the sofa, the breath leaving her lungs. 3 more. This is bigger than your case, Monique. Dominique said grimly. Tyler has been doing this for years. You were the first one who fought back publicly. Now others are finding their courage. Monique pressed her hand against her belly. Emma was due in 6 weeks. 6 weeks until Monique would hold her daughter for the first time. 6 weeks to prepare for a life she had never imagined, a life where she was not just a victim but a voice, not just a survivor but an advocate, not just a mother but a fighter. Good, Monique said, her voice hardening. Let them all come forward. Let everyone see who Tyler Jackson really is. After she hung up, she sat in the nursery, now fully painted and decorated. Sunlight streamed through the yellow curtains, casting warm shapes on the rug. The crib was ready with a soft white blanket draped over the rail. The changing table was stocked with diapers and wipes. Emma's tiny clothes were washed and folded in the drawers. Monique was ready too, ready to be a mother, ready to be an advocate, ready to build a life defined not by what Tyler had taken from her but by what she had won for herself. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number. You ruined my life. Monique knew instantly it was Tyler. He had found a way to contact her despite the protective order, probably using a burner phone. She stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the old fear try to rise up, but she pushed it down. She took a screenshot, forwarded it to Dominique with a note about the protective order violation, and blocked the number. Tyler Jackson did not get to control her narrative anymore. Monique Jackson was writing her own story now. 8 weeks later, Monique sat in a hospital room holding Emma Grace Jackson in her arms. Her daughter was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tiny button nose and dark hair that stuck up in impossible directions. She had arrived 3 days ago after 12 grueling hours of labor, and Monique had not stopped staring at her since. Kiana sat in the chair beside the bed, grinning like a proud aunt. Should she has your chin and Tyler's eyebrows, Monique said, without bitterness. Emma was half Tyler, and Monique would never try to deny that or hide it, but Emma would grow up knowing the truth about both her parents. There was a soft knock on the door. Dominique entered carrying a legal folder and a small gift bag. How is the most beautiful baby in the world? Dominique cooed, peering at the bundle in Monique's arms. Perfect, sleepy, hungry every 2 hours. Monique smiled. What brings you here? 2 things, Dominique said, pulling up a chair. First, a gift. She handed over the bag. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with Emma's name and birth date. It is beautiful. Thank you, Monique said, touched. Second, business. I know this is not the best timing, but I wanted you to know the final custody hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Tyler's attorney is asking for a continuance, but Judge Anderson denied it. What is Tyler's argument now? Monique asked, rocking Emma gently. Basically that the media attention has prejudiced the case. He wants a new judge. Will he get one? Kiana asked, leaning forward. No, Dominique shook her head. Judge Anderson ruled that the media coverage was a direct result of Tyler's own actions, and changing judges now would only delay justice. Monique looked down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully. What do you think will happen? I think Tyler will agree to the custody arrangement. Judge Anderson already outlined supervised visitation transitioning to regular visitation. Once he completes parenting classes, you retain primary physical custody. He pays child support, standard divorce parent arrangement, and if he does not agree, Dominique smiled, then we go back to court and Judge Anderson rules against him anyway. He knows he lost. Monique, his attorney knows he lost. They are just trying to salvage whatever they can. After Dominique left, a nurse came in to check on Emma, then a lactation consultant, then Kiana went to get coffee, and Monique was finally alone with her daughter. She looked at Emma's tiny face and felt a wave of fierce protectiveness wash over her. I made you a lot of promises before you were born, Monique whispered, stroking the baby's soft cheek. I promised you would be safe. I promised I would fight for you. I promised you would grow up knowing your mother never gave up. Emma made a small moan in her sleep and shifted her head. I kept those promises, and I am going to keep making new promises now. I promise you will never see your parents use you as a weapon. I promise you will never hear me badmouth your father, even though I have every right to. I promise you will grow up knowing that women do not have to accept abuse. We can fight back. We can win. Monique's phone buzzed quietly on the bedside table. An email from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They were holding a major fundraising event in New York next month and wanted Monique to be the keynote speaker. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified by that invitation. Now she felt a spark of excitement. She had a story to tell and people wanted to hear it. Another email popped up, this one from a literary agent. I represent several nonfiction authors, and I think your story Would make a powerful book. Would you be interested in discussing this further? A book. Monique had never considered writing a book, but maybe she should. Maybe her story could reach even more women if it was written down, preserved, accessible to anyone who needed it. The door opened again. This time it was Tyler. He stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable. He had clearly come straight from his office, still wearing a charcoal suit. Monique noticed he had lost weight and there were new lines of stress around his eyes. He looked older, more tired. "I know visiting hours are over," he said, his voice rough, "but I wanted to meet her." Monique's first instinct was to say no, to protect Emma from his toxic presence, but she forced herself to think rationally. Emma would have a relationship with her father whether Monique liked it or not. Better to start establishing boundaries now. "You can come in," Monique said, her voice cool, "but this does not count as your supervised visit. That still has to be arranged through the court monitor." Tyler nodded and approached the bed slowly. He looked at Emma with an expression Monique had never seen before. It might have been wonder, it might have been regret. "She is beautiful," he said quietly. "Yes," Monique agreed. "Can I hold her?" Tyler asked, reaching out his hands. "No." Monique pulled Emma closer against her chest. "Not until the custody arrangement is finalized. Not until you complete your parenting classes. Those are the rules." Tyler's jaw tightened in frustration, but he nodded, accepting the boundary. "I saw the article, the CNN interview, the speaking invitations, and they pissed you off." Monique finished the sentence for him. "You are making me look like a monster," Tyler said, defensiveness creeping into his tone. Monique looked at him steadily, her gaze unwavering. "I am telling the truth about what you did. If that makes you look like a monster, maybe you should think about why I never meant to hurt you," Tyler said, looking at the floor. "You told me our baby was a mistake. You sabotaged my job. You cut off my money. You tried to have me declared an unfit mother. What exactly did you think that would do if not hurt me?" Blake looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I was angry. I felt trapped. I handled it badly." "You handled it abusively," Monique corrected him. He looked at her for a long moment as if he might argue, then something shifted in his expression. The fight drained out of him. "You are right," he said quietly. "I did, and I am sorry." Monique had imagined this moment many times, the moment when Tyler would apologize. She had imagined feeling vindicated, triumphant, victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. "Your apology does not change anything," Monique said softly. "It does not erase what you did. It does not mean I forgive you, I know, but it is a start. If you want to be a real father to Emma, you need to do better. You need to actually change, not just say the right words." Tyler nodded. He looked at Emma one more time, a look of genuine longing on his face. "I will do better, I promise." "Prove it." Monique adjusted Emma in her arms, signaling the end of the interaction. "Now leave. Visiting hours are over and Emma needs to sleep." Tyler turned to go, then paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "You won, Monique. You beat me. You can stop fighting now." Monique smiled without humor. "I am not fighting you anymore, Tyler. I am fighting for every woman who comes after me. That fight is just beginning." He left without another word, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Kiana returned with 2 cups of coffee and looked around the room, sniffing the air. "Did someone just leave?" she asked suspiciously. "Tyler came to see Emma," Monique said, calm and collected. "And you let him?" Kiana asked, her eyes widening. "For 2 minutes, supervised by me on my terms." Monique took the coffee gratefully, savoring the warmth. "He apologized. Do you believe him?" Monique looked at the door where he had stood. "I believe he is sorry he got caught. I believe he is sorry his reputation is damaged. Whether he is actually sorry for what he did to me, time will tell." Emma stirred and began to fuss, a small cry escaping her lips. Monique shifted her and the baby settled against her chest, already learning where comfort could be found. Over the next few weeks, Monique established a new rhythm: wake up with Emma, feed Emma, change Emma, sleep when Emma slept, and in the brief moments when Emma was content, Monique worked on her advocacy. She drafted her speech for the fundraising event. She responded to the literary agent with interest. She scheduled 3 more speaking engagements. The custody hearing happened on schedule, exactly as Dominique had predicted. Tyler's attorney tried one last time to paint Monique as vindictive, using the media attention as evidence, but Judge Anderson shut him down immediately. Mrs. Jackson went public after experiencing significant abuse. The judge stated firmly from the bench she has every right to tell her story. If Mr. Jackson finds that embarrassing, he should have behaved better. The final ruling was a complete victory. Monique received primary physical custody. Tyler received supervised visitation, transitioning to regular visitation after 6 months of parenting classes. Child support was set at $8,000 per month. The marital estate was divided equally. Tyler signed the agreement without protest. There would be no appeal, no further legal battles. It was over. Monique walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, holding Emma close, ready to begin the rest of her life.
"My daughter told me through tears, Auntie hit me because I got a better grade than her son. I didn't say a word. I took her to urgent care. And later I started doing what made my brother's wife regret everything she had done. I used to believe I had a good read on people. I could tell when someone was hiding something or when a smile had teeth behind it. But when it came to my brother's wife, I missed every sign. Not just once. Over and over again. Her name is Valerie. She married my brother Chris 8 years ago, and from the start she had a way of making everything seem like a performance. She smiled at the right times, offered to help at family dinners, asked about my work, and always made a show of giving me birthday presents with way too much ribbon. But it always felt staged. There was something behind it I couldn't place. I should have tried harder to figure it out. He never liked Mia. I know that now. Back then, I told myself I was imagining it. The way her smile would stiffen when Mia talked about her science fair, or the way she'd interrupt her halfway through a story. Valerie's son Liam is a sweet kid, but school isn't his thing. He likes video games and bikes and anything that doesn't involve books. Which is fine. But Valerie always seemed uncomfortable about the fact that Mia loved learning. I think she saw my daughter's curiosity as a threat to her own kid. As if Mia's achievements somehow cast a shadow over Liam. The competition wasn't real. Mia never bragged, never compared, but Valerie made it real. So I let it go. I wanted peace in the family. I wanted to believe that, deep down, Valerie just didn't know how to connect with her. I convinced myself that things were fine. Until that Tuesday. I'd had a late meeting at work and asked Chris if Mia could stay with them after school. She'd been there before and nothing had ever seemed off. When I came to pick her up, she looked tired, but I thought it was just a long day. She got in the car quietly, stared out the window the whole drive, and when I handed her her favorite sandwich from the deli, she just held it. I kept glancing over, asking if everything was okay. She nodded, said she was just tired. At home, she headed for the bathroom to shower, but then she paused at the door. That's when I saw it. Just a quick flash of skin where her shirt lifted. A purple mark, deep and ugly, spreading under her ribs. I asked her what happened. At first she froze. I could see her calculating. Then the tears came fast and hard. And so did the truth. She told me she had gotten her science quiz back that day. 98%. She was proud, and she should have been. She said she showed it to Liam after school, hoping they could talk about it, maybe even study together next time. Apparently Valerie had seen the paper. She made a comment like, "Nice, but science doesn't really matter unless you're going to be a doctor." Mia shrugged it off, but Liam made some joke about how he'd never get that kind of grade. Mia laughed, not at him, just nervously. That's when Valerie told her not to act like she was better than anyone. Later, when Mia went to get her backpack from the hallway, Valerie followed her. Told her she needed to stop showing off. That it was rude to make her cousin feel stupid. And then she hit her. Flat across the side. Not a slap. Not a push. A hit. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys, told Mia to get in the car, and drove straight to urgent care. They checked her over, documented the bruises, and asked if she felt safe at home. I told them what happened. A nurse quietly slipped away and made a call. By the time we left, the report was already filed. That night my phone rang 5 times. Chris. I didn't answer. I sat at the kitchen table while Mia slept in her room, rereading the discharge notes. Suspected non-accidental injury. Abuse concern flagged. I thought about every comment Valerie had made over the years. Every time she said Mia was too intense, too sensitive, too smart for her own good. I thought about how I had let her babysit. I thought about how I had let my daughter believe that was normal. I stayed up until morning. I wasn't going to let this disappear. I wasn't going to settle for an apology or a family meeting. Valerie had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she never came near my daughter again. What I didn't know then was how deep this would go. How much would come to light? How many people had been staying silent just like I had? But now I had no doubt. I was going to destroy her. I didn't call Chris the next morning. I didn't owe him that. Instead I called a lawyer. Her name was Dana Marks, and she wasn't cheap, but I wasn't playing defense. I wanted someone who understood custody, domestic assault, and how to handle a case when the abuser wasn't a spouse, but a relative. I explained everything, and when I mentioned that the urgent care had already filed a report, Dana paused and asked me if I wanted to press charges. Yes. I wanted Valerie prosecuted. I wanted her to lose everything. We met that same day. Dana walked me through next steps, getting Mia's statement formally recorded, contacting Child Protective Services, requesting a restraining order, and preparing for potential pushback from my brother's side of the family. She didn't sugarcoat anything. It was going to be ugly. But she also told me something I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't going to be her first case involving someone like Valerie. That night I finally answered Chris's call. I told him to come over without her. He showed up looking like he hadn't slept either. He sat down at the kitchen table like he always did, but I didn't offer coffee. I didn't smile. I told him everything Mia had told me. At first he just stared at me. Then he laughed like it couldn't be real. He said Valerie wouldn't do that. That Mia must have misunderstood. Maybe she fell. Maybe she bruised herself playing with Liam. I handed him a copy of the urgent care report. His hands shook when he read the words, suspicion of child abuse. He asked me if I was really going to involve the police. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They were already involved. He left after 10 minutes. No goodbye. 2 days later, CPS came to our door. Routine check. They talked to Mia privately. I waited in the hallway pretending to scroll on my phone, listening for signs that she was okay. Later, the caseworker told me Mia's statement was clear, consistent, and heartbreaking. But then something unexpected happened. A week after the CPS visit, I got a call from Dana. She'd been contacted by another parent, a woman whose daughter used to go to the same tutoring group as Liam. She had heard what happened through her own circle and wanted to talk. Dana arranged a call. Her daughter had once come home from Valerie's house with a bruise too. Same story. Said she got too loud while playing inside and Valerie lost it. The girl never went back and the mother hadn't reported it. Said she didn't think anyone would believe her. Valerie had a way of making herself look like the responsible adult. Now she wanted to help. We filed to bring her in as a witness. It wasn't just about Mia anymore. There was a pattern. When the police finally interviewed Valerie, she played dumb. Claimed Mia was lying. That she would never hit a child. She even tried to say I was unstable, trying to turn my daughter against her because I was jealous of their family dynamic. But she didn't know we had photos, medical records, a second witness, and then a break. Chris's mother-in-law called me. He said Valerie was panicking. That she had confessed, not in those words but close enough. Said she'd lost her temper and taught the girl a lesson. Her mother had recorded part of the call. Dana almost smiled when I told her. We filed for a restraining order. It was granted immediately. Valerie wasn't allowed near Mia or our house. Liam wasn't allowed over anymore either. And while I hated that, I knew it wasn't his fault. But I wasn't taking chances. Chris didn't call for days. When he finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to say Valerie was pressing back. That she'd lawyered up. That she was telling people Mia made the whole thing up for attention. I told him to be careful which side he picked. Because this time I wasn't backing down. It started with whispers. A friend of mine from Mia's school called one morning. She didn't even sound surprised, just tired. Said she'd heard from 2 other parents who'd had uncomfortable experiences with Valerie, and now they were asking questions. One of them apparently had tried to file a complaint months ago. Her daughter had come home from a sleepover crying, saying she didn't want to go back. No bruises, nothing visible, just fear. Valerie told them their daughter was overly sensitive. They dropped it. Till now. Dana took their statements. Both women were willing to testify. One of them had even kept a journal, with the exact date of the sleepover and what her daughter had told her afterward. Dana said it was gold. I didn't realize how important that would be until the state attorney called us 2 days later to say they were taking the case. The report from urgent care, the additional testimonies, and the voicemail from Valerie's own mother. It was more than enough. The words were different now. This wasn't just about a slap. The DA used terms like child cruelty, malicious intent, pattern of behavior. I felt sick hearing it, even though it was exactly what I'd been fighting for. I didn't want Mia anywhere near these words. But I needed them to be real. Because this woman had built her life around a lie. That she was a good mother, a respectable wife, the trustworthy one in the family. And no one ever challenged her. Till now. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Chris showed up at my door. No warning. I almost didn't open it, but Mia wasn't home and I needed to see him. He looked hollow. Not angry. Not defensive. Just broken. He said he'd overheard Valerie on the phone with her sister 2 nights before. He thought he was asleep. She was ranting, saying she should have hit the girl harder if this was the thanks she got. Then she laughed. Said she wasn't going to apologize because it was just discipline. Chris told me he sat there in the hallway for a long time after that, listening to his own heartbeat. Realizing he didn't know who he'd married. Then he asked something that took the air out of the room. Did I think she'd ever hurt Liam? It hit me like a punch. I had never said it out loud, never even let myself think it. But I could see it now, clear as day. The temper, the way she'd talk about him sometimes like he was a burden. Like he was someone she had to manage instead of love. If she could hit someone else's child for doing better in school, what did she do to her own when he didn't meet her expectations? Chris didn't say much else. Just that he was moving out. He'd sent Liam to stay with his parents. He said he was sorry. Really sorry. I believed him. But it didn't fix anything. The charges came down 3 days later. 2 counts of child endangerment, 1 felony, 1 misdemeanor. Valerie was arrested at her house. She looked stunned, like none of it made sense. Like the world had turned on her unfairly. She was released on bail, but it was already over. The court issued a protective order against her. CPS filed an emergency petition, not just to keep her away from Mia, but from Liam too. I didn't ask for that part. It happened on its own. And it told me everything I needed to know. Then came the calls. Cousins, aunts, family I hadn't heard from in months. Some of them were supportive. Some told me I was overreacting. That kids lie, or that I should have handled this privately. One even asked if I was trying to ruin Valerie's life. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't trying to ruin Valerie's life. He did that herself. I was just making sure my daughter never had to see her again. Mia asked me that night if Valerie was going to jail. I told her probably. She looked up at me and said good. Then she went back to drawing. No big scene. No questions. Just peace. And it broke me a little. Because that's how long she'd been holding her breath. Like she was finally safe enough to exhale. But I wasn't done. The trial was coming. Dana said Valerie had hired her own attorney, someone who'd built a career on painting mothers as victims of vindictive accusations. That didn't scare me. I had facts. I had statements. I had Mia. And I was going to bury Valerie in the truth. The first court date wasn't even the real trial, just a preliminary hearing, but I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Dana warned me it would get ugly, and she was right. Valerie arrived looking polished, calm, even smug. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking man with gray hair and wireframe glasses, acted like he was prepping for a celebrity case. Chris sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Liam wasn't there, thank God. The judge went through the motions, confirming the charges. Valerie's lawyer tried to argue that the felony should be dropped right away because the incident was exaggerated. The prosecutor shut that down fast, outlining the medical report, the witness statements, the prior concerns from other families. Valerie rolled her eyes like she was listening to a boring documentary. Then came the surprise. Just as the judge was about to move on, the prosecutor said they had obtained additional evidence that morning. Evidence they hadn't known existed until a few days ago. Dana leaned forward. I mirrored her without thinking. It was a video. Security recording. From inside Chris and Valerie's own house. Apparently, Chris had forgotten that he and Valerie installed a small camera in the hallway 2 years ago. Originally to monitor Liam and the dog when they weren't home. He told the police about it during his second interview, not thinking it mattered. But the police subpoenaed the footage anyway. They found what they needed. The prosecutor pulled up a still image first. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't violent. Just a frozen moment of Valerie leaning toward Mia in the hallway. But the body language said everything. The angle of her arm. The way Mia was pulled against the wall. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't exaggeration. It was real. Valerie's face drained of color. Her lawyer stood up so fast his chair screeched. He demanded to know why this was being introduced without warning. The prosecutor calmly explained that the footage had been authenticated minutes before the hearing began and was now legally admissible. Then the audio clip came. Not the whole thing, just a few seconds. Valerie's voice, unmistakable, sharp and irritated, saying, "Don't you ever walk around here bragging again." My stomach twisted. Hearing it out loud was different from reading it in a report. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked stunned. Chris's head dropped into his hands. Valerie finally cracked. She blurted out something like it was taken out of context. The judge warned her to stay silent. Her lawyer grabbed her arm to shush her, but she pulled away from him and said she never meant to hurt anybody. Loud enough that everyone heard it. Dana wrote something on her notepad and slid it to me. She just admitted it. The judge rescheduled everything for a formal arraignment and granted an extended restraining order. And then he added something I didn't expect. Because of the new evidence, the prosecution would be adding an additional charge, intentional harm to a minor. Valerie didn't walk out of the courtroom looking smug anymore. She looked like someone who had finally realized she wasn't untouchable. We left quietly, but before I reached the parking lot, one of Chris's aunts stopped me. She hugged me and whispered that she had always suspected something was off, and she was sorry for not speaking up sooner. Another family member texted later, saying they were praying for Mia. Slowly, the divide in the family started to shift, this time in my direction. But the biggest surprise didn't come until that evening. Chris called and said he had gone back to the house to grab some things for Liam. And while he was searching through one of the drawers in Valerie's home office, he found something. A notebook. Liam's handwriting. A list of rules he had written for himself. Rules like don't make mom mad and don't show her my tests if they are bad and don't talk too much when she is cleaning. Then the one that made Chris break down on the phone. Don't cry if she gets upset. I sat there gripping the counter listening to my brother sob for the first time since we were kids. He said he didn't know. He said he should have known. He said he failed his son. And in that moment I realized this story was no longer about revenge. It was about saving every child she had ever scared into silence. And the trial hadn't even started yet. Court felt more like surgery than justice. It wasn't fast, it wasn't clean. It cut deep and slow, exposing everything. But this time I didn't flinch. Valerie came in each day dressed like she still believed in her own performance. Crisp blouse, hair done, eyes forward. Like the version of herself she had sold to everyone for years might somehow carry her through this. Her lawyer stuck to the same script. She was stressed, she had no prior offenses, it was a moment of poor judgment. And Mia had misunderstood her intentions. But that argument didn't survive the first morning. The hallway footage was shown in full. You could hear it, that shift in tone from passive to venom in her voice. The way she moved toward Mia. Even though the hit itself wasn't caught on camera, the build-up was worse. You could see the coldness, the control, the intent. People in the gallery went quiet. The judge didn't react, but the jury did. Then came Liam's notebook. Chris had turned it in not as revenge but out of guilt. He testified about how he found it in Valerie's desk drawer. The prosecution entered it into evidence page by page. Dana sat beside me watching the jury more than the words. On the screen they showed one page. Rule 6. If she's mad, don't speak until she says. Rule 8. If I get a bad grade, hide it. Rule 12. Don't cry. Crying makes it worse. The courtroom felt colder after that. Valerie's lawyer tried to dismiss it. Said kids write dramatic things, it doesn't prove abuse. But then the prosecution brought in a child psychologist who explained what that list meant. That it wasn't imagination. It was a survival strategy. Next they played Mia's recorded interview. She never cried during it. She didn't sound scared. Just quiet. Careful. The way she described the moment in the hallway, how she wanted to show Liam her test score, how proud she was, and how quickly it all turned. How she remembered Valerie's voice in her ear, telling her not to flaunt herself. How it wasn't the first time, just the first time she'd left a bruise. One of the jurors wiped her eyes after that. And then came the text message. Valerie had sent it months before to the other mom, the one whose daughter left their house crying. Dana had been sitting on this piece of evidence until the perfect moment. The D read it out loud to the court. If parents don't discipline their kids, someone has to. Kids today are too soft. The room went still. Valerie didn't even look surprised it was brought up. It was almost like she forgot she had ever said it. She looked hollow. Chris testified too. He took the stand and admitted he hadn't seen the signs. That he believed his wife over his instincts. That he failed his son. He held it together until the D asked him directly if he believed Mia was telling the truth. He looked over at me just for a second and said yes. Then he broke down. The prosecutor closed strong. They didn't go for emotion. They went for precision. They said this wasn't just about one child being hurt. It was about a pattern of control and violence masked as parenting. And Valerie had gotten away with it for years. They asked for 10 years. No parole for the first 6. No contact with minors, ever. Valerie's lawyer asked for probation. The judge didn't take long. 10 years in state prison. No parole until year 6. 5 years probation afterward. And a permanent restriction from working with, fostering, or even being alone with a minor ever again. Valerie didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just blinked slowly as if this was happening to someone else. I watched her get led out of the courtroom in cuffs. Her hands weren't shaking. Maybe she thought this would still pass. Maybe she thought the world would believe her version even now. But it didn't. That night Mia and I sat on the couch. I told her everything. She didn't ask for details. She didn't ask about Valerie. She just looked at me and said, "So we can go back to normal now?" I said yes. Then she asked if we could go to the library tomorrow. She wanted to check out a book on geology. And in that moment, everything snapped back into place. The air felt clear again. And I knew this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of the world she deserved. Thanksgiving was quiet that year. We stayed home. Just me and me. No big table, no folding chairs, no background chatter of football from the living room. I roasted a chicken because neither of us liked turkey, and we spent most of the day playing board games on the floor. She beat me 3 times in a row. It was perfect. And then 2 weeks before Christmas, Chris called. I hadn't heard from him since the sentencing. He texted me once. A short message thanking me for protecting Liam too, but I hadn't responded. I didn't know what to say to a man who had lived beside all of it and done nothing until it was too late. But now he was calling, asking if we'd come to his parents' house for a small dinner. No holiday drama, no cousins, no one else. Just us. He said Liam had been asking about Mia a lot. That he missed her. I said I'd think about it. Mia said yes before I finished telling her. So we went. Chris opened the door himself. No fanfare. He looked older, like he'd aged a decade in 6 months, but lighter somehow too, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally been acknowledged. Liam ran out from the kitchen and hugged Mia like he hadn't seen her in years. They disappeared down the hallway, probably to talk about school or Minecraft or whatever else they used to bond over. We sat in the living room. His parents brought out tea, then gave us space. Chris didn't circle around it. He just said he was sorry. But not the kind of sorry people say to get it over with. He told me he had been afraid. That part of him had seen it, little things, but he let himself believe Valerie's excuses. That Liam was dramatic. That Mia was showing off. That I was too protective. He said he'd seen her lose her temper before. That once, when Liam had gotten AC on a math quiz, Valerie had made him sit at the table without dinner until he finished, proving he knew it. He said he remembered thinking that was harsh. And then he did nothing. That was what haunted him, he said. Not what she did. What he didn't. He told me that finding that notebook was the worst and best thing that had ever happened to him. Because it was the moment he stopped defending her. The moment he started seeing his son clearly. He said he's in therapy now. Liam too. He doesn't let himself forget what happened. He doesn't try to explain it away. And he said something I'll never forget. You saved both of them. You didn't just save Mia. You saved my son from a life I didn't even realize I was forcing him to survive. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, I just didn't have the energy for tears anymore. It felt heavier than crying. Like the full weight of the last year was settling for the first time. We ate. We laughed a little. Mia and Liam disappeared into the kitchen for dessert, and Chris showed me a picture Liam had drawn in therapy. It was him and Mia standing next to a big red volcano, smiling. He said apparently, Mia is the reason Liam wants to start doing better in school. I told him to hold on to that. Before we left, Chris walked us out. The night was cold and there was frost on the car windows. He looked at Mia, then back at me, and said the one thing he hadn't said until now. I believe her. Every word. I just wish I had believed her sooner. Mia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She slipped her hand into mine and we went home. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight alone.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment in the story has touched your heart, brought you some reflection, some emotion, and hope. Thank you for taking the time to experience it with us, and hope that each next story will always accompany you on your life journey.